got to last time. Let me give a very simple illustration again. So I want you to put yourself in the following position. You're going to raise your hand, your right hand, to shoulder height. You're going to do this. Okay? Now, I want you to form the intention to do it, and then I want you to put that intention into action. So, right, you're thinking, I think I'm going to raise my right arm, and then you think, okay, I will. Okay? I want you to imagine that you've done that. So whatever that last little bit is, I will, right, up it goes, that could happen, and your arm doesn't go up. Why? Well, the neural pathway, you have a small stroke, you've been giving a paralyzing drug. There are a million things, right, between your willing, let's call it that, your act of willing that your arm go up, and your arm actually going up. The act of willing, the thing that you did, succeeded in doing, that is in the realm of freedom. The rest is in your empirical will, and that's in the realm of determinism. That is, whether what you do when in the realm of freedom has any effect in the deterministic world depends on the way the deterministic world is configured. It might be configured so that your arm goes up. It might be configured so that nothing happens, right? And so this is what leads Kant to say that the only good thing is a good will. Why? Well, it's the only thing that's up to you. Right? You can't be to blame if your arm doesn't go up, if you will it. Right? Moreover, right, suppose you will that your arm go up to stop the bullet. It doesn't go up, right, as a result of your act of will. It just goes up because of somebody raises it up from behind. So you will it, right, to go up, and behind you stands somebody else who pushes your arm up, right? Your arm wouldn't have gone up just because you willed it, because the causal thing isn't configured so that it will. But it does go up and it does stop the bullet. You don't get any credit for stopping the bullet. Why? Well, because it didn't stop the bullet as a result of your will. Only the things that come about as a result of your free will are you to blame for as the thought. And you can see how you get there, right? Just by thinking about what's free and what's determined. So if nothing was free, there'd be no morality. There is morality, so something must be free, but it can't be the empirical world, the perceptual world, because Newton has told us that that's how determined. He's given us the laws. So, Aristotle, remember, raised the question. Excuse me, Emmanuel, but could you tell me how it is that the noumenal will affects the empirical will? I mean, how does your noumenal will have anything to do with any of the actions that actually do merit moral praise and blame? I mean, you kill somebody, you poison somebody, you treat somebody well, you give someone a birthday present. These are all actions, and it's for these that we get credit, right? And these are the kinds of things that morality is about. I mean, it's not just about what goes on in people's heads. It's about what their bodies do. So could you tell me how it is that anything that we do noumenally has any empirical effect, any effect in the deterministic world at all? How is it that sometimes even, as a result of my willing, my arm goes up? Actually, it does it most of the time. Right up, look. Ha! Right? And you think, well, is that just kind of an accident? I mean, like, gee, gosh, that's kind of handy that the world is configured so that when I will, my arm goes up. But that should just be kind of a massive worry. And notice that it's a huge worry from over here on the determined side. So, look, from the determined side, right, your arm goes up because of previous causes in the determined realm. It's all about how particles are distributed. It's got nothing to do with Newton tells us nothing about funny acts of numinal wills. It's all about particles, right? So it's a complete explanation of why arms go up and down. How is it that we think, right, that we do control our arms? Are we under an illusion about that? It's just a massive accident that when we want to blink our eyes, we can. When we don't want them, we can hold it open. That we can make our arms do all kinds of fancy things, like writing on the blackboard and stuff. And all of that is just, it's just an illusion that our will is causing. Gee, Emmanuel, that doesn't sound very sensible, right? And Kant has an answer. And remember I said it lay in the footnotes. So it's always a wee bit suspicious when people put stuff in footnotes. That's what I find. But you know, you think, like, you don't want to put it up in the text where we can all see it. No, you want to hide it. So footnote 14, which is on page 14 of this edition, it's 402, if you've got that numbering. There might be brought against me, indeed there just has been brought against you, an objection that I take refuge behind the word respect, action, in an obscure feeling, instead of giving a clear answer to the question by means of a concept of reason. But even though respect is a feeling, it's not one received through any outside influence, but is rather one that is self-produced by means of a rational concept. Hence, it is specifically different from all feelings of the first kind, where it can all be reduced to inclinational view. What I recognize immediately as a law for me, I recognize with respect. This means merely the consciousness of the subordination of my will to a law without the mediation of other influences upon my sense. The immediate determination of the will by law and the consciousness thereof is called respect, which is hence regarded as the effect of the law upon the subject and not as the cause of the law. Respect is properly the representation of a worth that thwarts my self-love. Hence, respect is something that's regarded as an object of neither inclination nor fear, although, well, you can go on. Right at the end, Kant returns to this in the third section, footnote 3, which is around 460. Interest is that by which reason becomes practical. Oh, that's just what Aristotle was asking. How does this stuff become practical? That is, how does it do anything, right? A cause determining the will. Therefore, one says of rational beings only that they take an interest in something. Non-rational creatures feel only sensuous impulses. Reason takes an immediate interest in the action only when the universal validity of the maxim of the action is a sufficiently determining ground of the will. Such an interest alone is pure. What does that mean? Okay, I'll tell you. It just means this. So you look into your motivational self. So now we're going to look at action, which if you watch any movies with the Nazis in it, you come across quite a lot. The Nazis love to put Achtung on things. That means watch out, danger, be on guard, and that's equal to respect. And it's actually got a little bit of a feeling of awe to it. It's hard to quite grasp exactly how it goes, but it's like that. And here's the thought of, so here's your motivational stuff. Just amazed at how my rational will can control my hand when I write that. It could be writing, equations, and I'm trying to write motivational stuff, but it just keeps doing what I want it to do, which is great. So I look into my motivational stuff, and in here I find a series of motives. So whatever they are, motivating things, maxims, in fact, handily enough. That is, and we know what those are, roughly speaking. They're plans or intentions of action, right there. I'm going to do the following kinds of things, or, you know, here's why I'm going to do that. I'm going to go to the refrigerator because I want a Coca-Cola, and I believe there's one in the refrigerator, and not the maxim or something like that. And then I say, let anyone who wants, you know, a Coca-Cola and believes there's a Coca-Cola in the refrigerator, has a refrigerator with a Coca, goes. That's the sort of thing that maxims are. And what I discover when I look into my motivational set is all my maxims satisfy the categorical imperative. We know what that is from last time, that we didn't talk about it too much and such. The categorical imperative is just this, that all my maxims are such that I would be happy to have, not happy, excuse me. Let's read this. I have all and only maxims that I will, that other people have as maxims to all other rational agents. So the thought is, I see that there's nothing inconsistent about my willing. So suppose I were God, I could just make it true that all your motivational sets were like mine in this regard. And I would do that. If I would do that, then all of my maxims pass the categorical imperative. So think of it this way. There's a double willing. There's the willing, and then there's the willing that this maxim be the maxim of any similarly situated agent. And it's that last part, right, that I see that I'm no different from everyone else with respect to this. We're all in the same boat. You might think, as Kant himself makes use of this idea, you might think of the golden rule. It's a version, it's like the golden rule, only it's applied to motivational sets, right? So it says, the golden rule says, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. And then the Kant's version is, will those things that you would be willing to have others will, right? So you just back up a step to the will, and you say, I want you to will towards me the kinds of things I will towards you, and I will towards you the kinds of things I will. That's kind of nice, right? And then Kant milks that thing to get as much sort of feel for it as he can. So he says, you know, it's treating other people as ends, not as means to ends. Why? Well, think about it for a second, right? When I act on a maxim towards you that I wouldn't want you to will, I wouldn't will that you act on towards me, I'm making an exception of myself, and I'm treating you as a means to satisfying my thing. So I wouldn't want you to do that. Don't you treat me as a means. Okay, but then I think, okay, then I won't treat you as a means either. So it's kind of like the goal. So Kant pulls all these things out, right? Yeah.
Wouldn't you say it might be like a little more perfect than the golden rule? Because under the golden rule, like a masochist could treat someone as they wanted to be treated.
Well, there's a little worry about this with Kant, too, you know. So you might think some of these same worries might come back, right? It's only if I think of the will, the numinal will, as somehow or other fairly devoid of such kinds of content. So otherwise, that's a bit like the worry we had, love your neighbor as yourself. And, you know, you take out a whip and start beating them, and someone says, wait a minute, you're not following the rules. You say, yes, I am. I like to be beaten myself, so I'm beating my neighbor. What's wrong with that? Right? You've got to find a way to get out of those kinds of... The perverse will is a real problem. Yeah?
What if the categorical imperative wouldn't apply to, like, another set of rational beings that aren't human, or would come into tension if there are, like, interrelations between them?
So notice that it's a structural feature of the will, right? So what it says is, everything in my will should pass the categorical imperative. It doesn't tell me that all the things that are in each of our wills have to otherwise be the same. They just all have to match the categorical imperative. So it might well be that, and Kant thinks that it's true, that gods and angels and so on are also subject to this constraint, but they don't feel it as a constraint. It's not for them, as he says, an imperative, right? Because they just naturally follow it. There's no obstacle. Whereas with us, there is, right? The phenomenal will, or the empirical will, it also calls it the phenomenal will. In us, these two wills can be in conflict. So remember, go back to Aristotle with the difference between self-control, weak will, and virtue. The very same categories apply, but just given different names in Kant. If your empirical will and your rational will are always in accord, so you always do the very thing that the numinal will have you do, then you're good. Right? If there's conflict and you do the thing that your rational will wants, then you're good too. There's a difference from Aristotle. Right? He thinks that self-control is really good. That's really good. And then if your empirical will sometimes goes against your rational will and you act on your empirical will, that's bad. So think of these two wills as having three possible things. They can be in harmony, they can be in conflict, and if they're in conflict, one can win or the other can win. That's the picture. So look at my motivational set and I see all of my maxims satisfy the categorical imperative. What do I feel? Acton. It's a bit like when I look up at the starry heavens above. These are the two objects of Acton. Right? The moral law within and the starry heavens above. You might ask, gee, how could there be two such different things that both inspire awe? Right? It's a bit like, I have this feeling when I add 2 and 2 and get 4, and I also have it when I eat omelets. You think, well, gosh, you wired up funny. Right? Sometimes I eat an omelet, but if I just want that feeling, I add 2 and 2 as well, and that works. That would be very strange. And these are equally strange until you reflect on what it is about the starry heavens that makes you feel awe. It's not just their immensity. It's their rational order. It's the fact that something so colossal and enormous and glorious can follow rigorous laws. So if you like, Kant's categorical imperative, this is what he says about himself. He says he's the Newton of this stuff, whatever it is. The numinal Newton. So Newton describes the real world and I describe that other world. Oh, good. Right, so the numinal world Kant describes, and Kant says, yeah, look, it's just as law-governed as the empirical world, except it's governed not by empirical laws, but by rational laws, like the laws of logic. Cool. And that's what inspires the law. Right? So you think, not because you're looking at two radically different things, you're looking at similar features of the two, the law-governedness of it all. So notice all that stuff. You read those footnotes about Acton, you'll see that that's what it is. It's the law-governed nature of the will that satisfies the categorical imperative that gives you that buzz. That's awe. So Kant says, right? Well, I'll tell you what connects. So Aristotle, I'll tell you what connects the empirical will with the numinal will. And it's this little thing here, and it's Acton. So Acton now comes into play as follows. This is the next bit of Aristotle's. So Acton Acton is in your empirical will, and it's in your empirical will with other stuff, right? So let's take a look. In here, there are appetites. We'll just focus on appetites, other desires. Is that right? Okay. Appetites, desires. And so Achtung can conflict with other desires or not, right? If it does conflict, Achtung may win, or other desire. Right? That's just what happens, right? So here's my empirical will. Achtung looks up at what the categorical imperative requires and feels awe. It says, oh, you know, your will doesn't satisfy the categorical imperative. Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't lie. But your desire to lie is stronger, and so you lie. Or, go the other way, right? Your desire to lie is weaker, in which case Achtung wins, you don't lie, that's good. And Kant actually says the good will shines out in cases where there's conflict. You can see it more clearly when, you know, the empirical will goes the other way, but you do what Achtung requires of you anyway. There you see the good will shine. Now, it's not the only case, of course. It also shines out where there's no conflict. It's also present when there's no conflict. But as Kant says, it really shines out when all of your empirical will goes against your numinal will, but you do what the numinal will requires of you. Why? Well, because your Achtung is stronger than the other elements in your empirical will. Are you with me? It's really very simple. You'll notice that Aristotle is going to say now, oh, so your Achtung is like my wish. Remember I drew this little circle, I said wish went in it? Right? Now you see what the issue is, right? Because now that we had wish before, and what wish did was it looked at calculations of your overall good, and it said, right, don't do this, not for your overall good. You may want to do it now, but it's really going to be bad later. So you don't do it if you're self-controlled or virtuous. So he says, your Achtung is like my wish. They're similar in their psychological roles, but there's a big difference. Except, wish is you. And isn't. Right? Just look at Achtung. Achtung doesn't look at all at your happiness. Achtung looks at a rational structure that's present in the starry heavens above and in your numinal will, and your will, when all your maxims are in accord with the categorical imperative. And that says nothing about you. It doesn't say, hey, you know, when all the starry heavens above are all in that nice order, they're as happy as can be. If you're in that order, you be happy too. No. That's exactly what makes Kant so different. Kant thinks that there's something that we are motivated by that has nothing to do with happiness, and is precisely what ethics is about. So he says, you see, those damn Greeks, right, they didn't talk about ethics at all. They just talked about self-interest, right, about how to maximize your happiness. Ethics is just precisely about not satisfying. If it was all about satisfying your interest, we wouldn't need it. It'd just be prudence, right? But it's precisely not that. It says no to your self-interest And it says it with greater authority than your self-interest can speak to you. Why? Because it speaks with the authority of reason. You with me? In a way, see how simple it is? I mean, it really is simple. You just keep the broad architecture in mind, right? And then it becomes really quite clear what Kant is on about, right? So when my motivational set, right, all my maxims satisfy the categorical imperative, then I feel actum. And it's that feeling of actum that then, right, can start moving my body because it's in my empirical will, but it can conflict with other things that are in my empirical will, so it may not move my body. And then the good person is the one where the body moves as actum dictates. Right. Now, one of the things we can see right away is that while wish is no different from other desires in this regard, it too is for connected to our pleasure, well-being, and happiness, right? It's no different in that regard. The only difference is it comes into play as the result of calculating means to ends. Actum is quite different. It's not about calculating means to ends. It's about rational order and structure itself. Right? It looks at that. Right? That's what it's like. How ordered and structured. Okay. And so Aristotle now is going to say, wait, look, this sounds awfully like, now that you're telling me, this sounds awfully like my nobleness, my tokalan, because here's the thought I had, this is Aristotle, right, talking now to Kant, but kind of, they're on friendly terms for a minute while he explains something. He says, yeah, so, my kalan, my notion of the noble, is an ordered, unstructured sort of thing, too. So, when I say the virtuous person is motivated directly by nobility and tokalan, and only when they're so motivated do their motives contribute to their happiness. I'm telling a story a bit like you. Let's see if we can just make that as clear as we can. So, we've seen how wish and actum are structurally rather similar. We see a difference. One is about happiness and one is not. And now Aristotle is going to add a little wrinkle, and then Kant is going to reply. It's a dialectic, so... Okay, so now we're at a few stages down on the dialectic. And so what we see over here is so actum... It's the rational order that sparks the actum, right? It's a bit like this, you could be into rational order, right? You just love solved equations, you just love geometrical proofs, you just love the laws of nature and operation. You like everything that you can understand and penetrate with your reason and explain by means of laws. And you just think, that is the coolest thing. So that's a bit like Democritus saying he'd rather know one causal law than rule all of Persia. Right? The thought is, I just love that. Right? That's great. Okay, so hold that thought for a second. And once we get to this point, so now we get a little Aristotle riff on actum. It says, it's like my you can look up my long note on this in the ethics, and you'll see how he explains it. He says the noble is related to order, harmony, structure, right? So when you look at, so think about beauty first, because that's another way that Kalana is often translated, the nobly beautiful, or in some translations, the fine, right? So the nobly beautiful is actually has to have a certain order, a certain structure, a certain, right, intelligibility. And he says, it's like my Kalan in this regard. Well, first, it's got to do with rational order. And second, right, good actions are for the sake and only when done for its sake contribute. That's a part that even scholars tend to get a bit confused by. So let's spend a few minutes thinking about this one. So it's a constant theme in the ethics that in order for an action to be virtuous, you must do it for the sake of tokalam, the sake of the noble, the sake of what is noble. That's a constant theme. If you look up noble in the index to my translation, you get every occurrence of it. It will tell you all this, right? If you look up the big long footnote on the noble, it will tell you all about how it's connected to rational order, right? So there's the picture. And now here's the thought. There are two issues we can raise about a value. We can ask, is it an intrinsic value? Right? Is it a non-intrinsic value, an instrumental value? Or is it a little bit of both? Both a bit intrinsically valuable and valuable because of what it does. That's Glaucon's division of goods. Never goes away. Right? Everybody has to appeal to it. It's so obvious. Okay. But there's a different question we can ask. How should we value those values? So you might, so let me give it an obvious thing, right? So take music, right? So, and let's suppose that we agree that it's intrinsically valuable, right? So you, at least, it may be also valuable for its consequences, but it's intrinsically valuable. So, but how do you have to value it in order to get its intrinsic value? Right, so here's some ways not to get it, right? Here's a way not to get the intrinsic value of music. Block up your ears, right? Until all you can hear is blah, 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 blah. Now you're ready. Or, as I think, listen to it on a really crappy set of speakers with a really lousy, listen to it on those crummy earbuds they give you with your iPhone. That's going to sound like that, right? That is not a good way to appreciate the beauty of music. Here's another way not to do it, right? Get your friends who are incompetent musicians to come over and play it for you, don't listen to the Bach violin suites played by Gideon Kramer. Get your kid to play it on the two-son violin. You really got the beauty then. Right? So that's a really bad way to get the beauty. You have to be in the right condition, good ears, good reproduction, good players, all that stuff, to really see the beauty that's there. Similarly, think about how to appreciate, how to value the value of a painting or of art, right? There are specific ways to go about getting at its value. So suppose you're thinking this. When I go into people's houses and I see their paintings on the wall, this is what I think. 500 bucks. 25. Right? And I've just valued their paintings, right? And that's the way an auctioneer values paintings, right? It's not the way to get at the aesthetic merits. The auctioneers could care less about their aesthetic merits. The only question is, what can you sell them for, right? That's a bad way to get at the aesthetic value. Think about valuing another person in the way that a friend does. Right, here is a bad way to do it. Be ready to talk to them and so forth when you need something from them, but when you don't, just don't answer the phone, right? Or never do anything they want. That's the way I find friends really like to be with me. It's just whenever they say, I'd really like to do this, you say, no, we'll do what I want for once. Or twice, or 3 times, actually, right? That's not good, right? It's a bad way to value your friend. So, what Aristotle says is this. In order for your actions to contribute to your happiness, there's a way you have to value them. If you value them this way, right, how much money will I get for doing them? You won't get the happiness back. Why? Because in order to get the happiness, you've got to value the things in the right way. And the way to value moral actions, right, is to do them for the sake of the noble, and then you get the eudaimonic reward. Notice, go back to the book of Job. You don't get God to reward you unless you do the perfect and upright things for their own sake. And then God rewards you. But he doesn't reward you for doing them in order to get the reward that God gives you. See the difference in how you value them makes a big difference to how they contribute to your happiness. So, right, Kant says, Aristotle says, yeah, you see, I kind of go part of the way with you because my wish is related to reason, and moreover, my virtuous actions are motivated by response to something like well-ordered and reasonless, but like your actum, right? And it's only when I do value them in that way, do them for that reason, that they contribute to my happiness. That's the fundamental, a deep and fundamental fact to get if you want to understand ethics, which is not, right, will I get a reward, but how do I have to value what I do to get the reward? Right. And if you have to value it for its own sake to get the reward, then you're already putting intrinsic value on the thing that you do, and you get the reward because you value it in the way appropriate to its intrinsic value. That's the thought. So you've got to hold that very clearly in mind, that you don't become sort of just focused on rewards, because rewards are part of the picture. You become focused on rewards when those are what motivate you to do everything that you do. Rewards can be part of the picture without being things that motivate you in each case to do what you do. I could tell you this in a different way. Should I? I'll tell it to you in a different way. So let's take a look at our motivational set again. We'll do another one. Here's my motivational set. I find this is the easiest way to understand what's going on, but not everybody agrees with me that it's the easiest way. So here's my motivational set, and here are 2 questions that I can ask about it. One is, what should I do? That's an action-related question that I pose to my motivation. So I look at what I'm motivated to do, and I ask, what should I do? Should I lie or tell the truth? Should I steal the iPad or leave it where it is? Right? Should I go out to dinner with my friend tonight, even though I'd rather stay at home? Right? Those kinds of questions. That's what should I do? But there's another question, is who should I be? So the first question looks into my already existing motivational set and asks, what should I do? The second question says, right? And it's the right. What should I put into my So this is this question, right? So think it's much easier. So, right, can you everybody see that? What shall I be is this question, what shall I put into my motivational set? So let me give you the feel for the difference. And as soon as you get the feel for it, you'll be able to sort of see what the issue is. So it's much easier if you're thinking about bringing up a child who as yet doesn't have a developed motivational set than in your own case, because you've already got one. So think about the kinds of motives that you want to put in your child's motivational set, right? How do you want your child to be? Who do you want your child to be? What kind of a person? So one thought is, and so I'm just going to stick with a very simple case, you think that most people's lives don't go very well if they're not able to give and attract love and friendship. It really is a lonely and isolating kind of life. And that's just a fact about us, right? But most people who talk about happiness and what's made their life go well talk about deep bonds with others, satisfying friendships, good love relations, right? You cut those out, you're dealing with either a very unusual person who can be happy without it, there might be such people, right? But in general, you think it's good to develop in my child the capacity to form these things. And what are you asking? You're saying, what should I encourage grow up in my child's motivational self to promote their happiness? Right? So I want, this is like all parents, you want your children to be happy. And the question is, what should you put in their motivational self so that they will be happy? Look what you just thought. You should put a capacity to love and be loved, to form good friendships. And what's that kind of motive? Well, it's this, right? It's to be motivated to do things for the other person's sake, simply because they want to. It's not this. Do things for the other person when it does something for me. That's not what you want to put in your child's motivational stuff. That will make them opportunists, and they'll be spotted, and nobody will want to be their friend, right? You want, as your friends, people who take your wants and needs seriously as motivating factors, even when it goes against what they happen to want to do. It just doesn't settle the question that you wanted to see this movie and they wanted to see that other, and it always just settles that you do what you want. Oh, sometimes you compromise, right? And you do it because you value the other person's desires, okay? So, when we look at the motivational self, we've got two kinds of questions we can ask. What am I motivated to do? And then what shall I put in there? And what I can then put in there is to say motives that are related to what is noble and worth doing for its own sake. So notice that I can be a eudaemonist of the, as we say, second order motives, what I put in my motivational set. Although at the first order, I have many motives that are just directly about other people's wants and needs. There's no conflict. The conflict only seems to appear when you look at what am I motivated to do, not what should be in my motivational self. And of course, once I've got my motivational self, that's what will result in my doing. Right? I'll be a person of a certain kind. So if I'm a friendly, loving kind of person, I'll take other people's interests seriously, and I don't have to deliberate about that. That's just what I will do. In just the way that if in my motivational set goes a strong desire for healthy food, that's what I will choose. That's what I will like. That's what I will think is really good eating. Right? And I've got it there because my parents wisely helped design my motivational set so that I wouldn't find myself getting early onset diabetes and being obese. Right? You with me? Yeah.
I don't know. There's something missing for me in that just believe that everyone can reach everyone who's a rational being, obviously, is a stipulation, but does he believe everyone who has has that classification can reach the categorical imperative by themselves, or do they need to be taught that and taught about the
Well, I think
concept?
there are two different questions, right? So Kant thinks, look, we all have this fact. Hold that thought. Some of us encounter massive conflict between this and our empirical will, and some of us don't. Why? Well, some of us have been well brought up, and some of us haven't. So he can tell the same kind of Aristotelian story, but notice the big difference. When I ask, how should I design my motivational set? It's a eudaimenistic question. How should I do it so as to make my child happy? Or how should I do it so as to make myself happy? When Kant asks the question, who shall I be? That's not the question he asks, right? He asks the different question, right? Well, how should I design the motivational self so that it will satisfy the categorical imperative? So that it will be rationally well ordered, so that I won't get any conflict in my will. Huh? And now, you see, so now we see the real difference between, at the deepest level, we see the real difference between Plato and Aristotle on the one hand. I left Plato out of the equation because I didn't want you to have too many figures to have to deal with, but Aristotle and Plato are exactly the same in this regard. It's just Aristotle is a lot more focused and expressing it than Plato is. But here's the thought again. All practical questions are eudaimenistic questions. They're all based on what will make us happy. Right? They have an expansive notion of happiness, right? Because actually acting rationally can itself make us happy, as we saw, right? Acting instrumentally, rationally can make you happy because you can think what a groovy thing it is to be able to solve problems. Contemplating can make you happy. That rational appreciation of order can make you happy because you can enjoy it. Not everybody does, but if you enjoy it, it'll be in your happiness promoting stuff, right? The issue, yeah, go ahead.
Is there like any place for happiness within Kant?
Yeah, and we're going to get there. Yeah. So, right, so far you see the big differences and where they lie. Yes.
So, the sense that I've gotten about Kant is that he doesn't want you to follow the categorical imperative because it only
That's right.
Because like, that's the right thing to do.
That's right.
So, would he want you to have the second order desire, second order motivation to want to fulfill the categorical imperative?
Yeah. So a thought would be, in a way, it's sort of like this. How would I design my child's motivational stuff to make them a person of duty? And how would I do it's different. Next door live not the Presbyterian Christians, but the happy Greek hedonists who say, how do I make my child happy? The Presbyterians are thinking, what a terrible thing to do to a poor child, to give them a motivational set that will make them happy. I want one that will make them beautiful, right? Right?
But I guess like my confusion is that when I think of like what a motivation is, it's something that like by doing it, it'll make you like feel good about yourself.
Yeah. In this case, not. In this case, the dutiful action is one that, well, it will if you've got acting, you will feel good about it, right? Because but what you'll feel is not eudaimenistic good. You'll rather feel awe, right? Which is not itself a contributor to happiness. It's just a sense that you are tracking something that's really worth tracking. But there may be it may not be in the least bit enjoyable, right? That's the sort of thought. So here, so you with me so far? And Aristotle, so you see how it's all played out down to this. So now we've got, Aristotle says, your acton is a bit like my nobility. Your acton is a bit like my wish. Your structure of the self is a bit like my structure of the self. Really what it all boils down to, though, is your acton is sensitive to something non-eudaimenistic. It's sensitive to this rational structural stuff. That's got nothing to do with eudaimonia at all. And moreover, now here comes the crucial part. right? It's that you believe, you, Aristotle, believe, that when you do noble actions for their own sake, it's guaranteed to contribute to your happiness. There's no slippage. It can't be that you do the noble thing for its own sake and you're not. Insofar as it's a constitutive element of happiness. It's part of what happiness is. And so there's no further thing that you might or might not get, right? When you play the music in tune, the result is that the music is played in tune. There's no further element. And in the same way, when you do noble acts for their own sake, that constitutes acting well, and acting well is being happy, right? Yeah. Here's, and so Aristotle says, I see, what I don't understand is how we're motivated to do this acting stuff when it doesn't contribute to our happiness. Aren't you just an order fetishist or something? Right, you're just into that, and you think everybody should be into it. But frankly, if it doesn't contribute to happiness, I don't see why we would be motivated to do it at all. And so that's kind of like the incredulous stare, which I think is the right thing to actually offer to somebody who tells you that you should be busy doing all the load of stuff that doesn't make you happy. It's very hard to get it so that you think, oh, I should value that more than my happiness. You're killing it, right? That's the thought. And Kant actually has a response. And the response is essentially the book of Job. So what he says is this. Now, you don't get this so much in the grammar, so you don't have to trust me, though. I promise you that it's there. Kant talks about, so if we go back to the very beginning, so let's look at section 1 on page 7 on this edition, 393 if you want. There's no possibility of thinking of anything at all in the world, or even out of it, which can be regarded as good without qualification except a goodwill. We understand why that's the only thing that's up to you. Intelligence with judgment and whatever talents of the mind one might want to name are doubtless in many respects good and desirable, as are such qualities of temperament as courage, resolution, perseverance. But they can also become extremely bad and harmful if the will, which is to make use of these gifts of nature, and which in its special constitution is called character, is not good. The same holds with gifts of fortune, power, riches, honor, even health, and that complete well-being and contentment, now we're into eudaimonia, with one's condition, which is called happiness, make for pride, and one's condition, which is called happiness, make for pride and often, hereby even arrogance, unless there is a good will to correct their influence on the mind, and herewith also to rectify the whole principle of action and make it right? You've got to not be Aristotelian. The sight of a being who is not graced by any touch of a pure and good will, but who yet enjoys an uninterrupted prosperity, can never delight a rational and impartial spectator. Thus a good will seems to constitute the indispensable condition of being even worthy of happiness. So here's the way to think with Kant. So here's a world. Here are two worlds. World 1. The same amount of happiness is present in both, right? So each is equally happy. So they're equally happy worlds. But now we ask about their justice. In this one, the just are happy. And in this one, unjust are happy. And Kant says, this world is obviously better than this one. It's better to be in a world where the just are happy than a world in which the unjust are happy. And we all acknowledge that world one is better. But it's not better in terms of happiness, because they're equally happy. So what is the difference? Well, that's what I'm telling you. The difference is that in the just world, right, those with goodwill are happy. And Aristotle says, absolutely, and they will be. Because it can't be that two worlds are equally happy, but in one the just are happy and the others are unjust. Why? Because justice is a condition of happiness. You can't be happy and unjust. You can't be equally happy and unjust just through Symmachus's challenge, right? Show me that merely by the presence of justice in my soul, I will be happier than by the presence of injustice, even if there are no further consequences. And Plato says, I will. I'll show you that. Okay, and that's exactly what Aristotle thinks too. Right, so Kant sets it up this way. He says, can't you imagine two worlds that are equally happy? And he thinks yes, right? And because he thinks yes, he thinks there's a further question, right? What is it that makes one world better than the other, which we agree it is? And he thinks, that's what I'm telling you about. There must be non-eudaimonic value to explain that. And Aristotle says, there's no such possible setup. You can't set it up this way. It can't be that they're equally happy, but not equally just. Why? I've just told you, man. What do you want? Go through the Republic again, right? That's the whole thought, right? You get it? That's it. That's why you can't. And now comes the little Kant thing. So you might think that's just it, but Kant has another little factor. What he says is, right? This world, world one, where the just are happy, is better. So we should want to bring about that world, right? We should want to bring about the better world. And that's what we want to make justice and happiness coincide, though they don't, in fact, in our world. Right, where the wicked flourish like the great bay tree, and the virtuous are often miserable. We want to change that. So we want to bring about a coincidence of virtue and happiness. On Aristotle's view, you don't have to do anything to bring that about. Why? Because if you've got a just world, you've got a happy world. And if you've got a happy world, you've got a just world. And that's true because of the nature of happiness and justice. Kant says no, but he says still would be better to bring about the coincidence of the two. And then he tells you this. This is in the Critique of Pure Reason. It's hard to pick those sections to show you, but I promise you that they're there. So Kant says this. It's not enough for people like us to do the just thing that we look at the categorical imperative. We also need, as he puts it, have grounds for rational hope. We have to be able to hope that we can bring about a coincidence of justice and happiness. And that, he says, can happen only in a supersensible kingdom governed by a perfect heaven. In other words, we have to try, as beings here on earth, to bring about heaven on earth, to make it so that the just and the happy coincide. But we're never going to succeed. Famous claim of Kant. Out of the crooked timber of humanity, nothing straight was ever made. You can't get human beings on this, governed by other human beings. You can produce on earth a happy kingdom of ends, as he calls it, where happiness and justice coincide. We've got to wait for God to put them together. Right? Why does he think that? Now we can ask another question. Right? You with me? So you see, for Plato and Aristotle, the challenge was to show that virtue was its own reward. It came with the happiness. on Kant's view, that's impossible. You're never going to be able to do that. The reward has to be added on by a divine being who tracks your justice. And if you're just for justice's sake, as in the book of Job, rewards you. And so once we figure out, once we've gone through that whole little story, we see that, Kant also thinks that happiness is really important, that we wouldn't have enough motivation to be just if we didn't think that, right? By being just, we would get a reward. Even though we don't do the justice for the reward, because then you don't get it, but we still wouldn't have enough interest. So he's conceding something. Why would I want to do something that in the end doesn't contribute to my happiness? And Kant says, well, it doesn't contribute intrinsically to your happiness, but it does contribute extrinsically, because there's a being who will give you the happiness if you can, good for goodness' sake. See? Now, of course, you might worry about the payoff, right? You might think, whoa, wait, right? But that's the picture. Kind of course, the Christian who thinks that that's just the way it's going to be. Now, let's wind the clock back one more stage and come at it from a different point of view. So now, Aristotle says, I see. Okay, so you're a kind of eudaimonos too. That is, you're a bit like me, right? I think that you can only get happiness from doing virtuous actions for their own sake, for the sake of the noble. You think you can only get them if you do them for duty or the categorical imperative. That's a kind of rational order. My kalan is a kind of rational order. So we're a lot alike. I think that will make you intrinsically happy. You think it won't. So you think there has to be a further structure to the world where there's a being that sticks on the happiness. I don't think that. I don't think that happiness needs to be stuck on, as Aristotle says, like an ornament to virtue. It's already part of intrinsic to virtue. And then he pauses and he says, could you tell me, just fill me in, what do you mean by happiness? Could you just tell, and this is where it is. Kant thinks this, and you'll see it in the groundwork. It's simply he's a thrysomachian about happiness. He thinks that happiness comes from the satisfaction of your appetites. He doesn't think that it can come from, right, the pleasure you take in intrinsic and in means-ends reasoning, or from contemplating the world. Happiness is getting what you want, where what you want is pretty much physical pleasure and so on. You want notice he's not an elitist, right? So he's got to say, everybody gets this reward. So not just the philosophers and the ones who value reasoning for its own sake. It's got to be a reward that everyone can get. And what's that? Well, it's the lowest common denominator reward. That's the satisfaction of appetites. Everybody wants that. They may want other things, but paradise is going to be, well, a Hawaiian vacation, a good one, for everyone. And there's some, get it? Right, so the thought is, okay, let's pull out. What is happiness? And for Kant, it's roughly appetite satisfaction. And Aristotle says, well, if we were all cattle,